guys, welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new around here, my name is Divyanka and I'm a doctor of pharmacy here in the US. Here on this channel, I'm hoping to provide both you and I with resources so that we can live our best and most productive life. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did an overview video of all the different functional areas a PharmD could enter after graduating within the pharmaceutical industry. Of course, that was just an overview video and I didn't have the time to really go deeper into each functional area to really explain it. So in today's video, I'm going to be highlighting the department called Pharmacovigilance, also known as drug safety, and I'm really going to try to go over all the different details. So without any further ado, let's just get right into it. I think pharmacovigilance is actually one of the perfect functional areas for a PharmD to transition into from pharmacy school. I'll go into the specific details as to why further along in the video, but I just wanted to highlight that at the beginning. So according to the IPHO Industry Fellowship Analysis paper that was just released for the 2020-2021 fellowship round, it was highlighted that there were 32 fellowships within pharmacovigilance available to students, and overall the demand for fellowships within pharmacovigilance has increased just like every other functional area. Now, that might not seem like a lot of positions, but I think there's a reason as to why there are less fellowships within pharmacovigilance, and again, I'll get to that later, but I think a lot of that has to do with maybe not having a need for a fellow. There are many entry-level positions within pharmacovigilance at many different companies, and overall I've seen a good amount of entry-level positions within pharmacovigilance compared to other functional areas. So based on those facts, I can kind of presume that that could be the reason there aren't as many availabilities in terms of fellowships for pharmacovigilance. Overall, I do think it's one of the easiest departments to get your foot in the door within the pharma industry coming from a pharmacy background. Okay, so what is pharmacovigilance? The World Health Organization defines pharmacovigilance as the science and activities related to the detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects or any other drug-related problem. So if you're in pharmacy school or have a pharmacy background, that definition in and of itself should have kind of shown you why that pharmacy background is really useful within this functional area. The main work you're doing is revolving any adverse events or any events with their drug compounds at a specific company that need to be looked into. Now, within clinical trials, the drug development process, the safety profile of a drug is incredibly important. You guys probably know this, but in every study, in every drug, you have to basically prove to the FDA that the drug works, it's efficacious, and that it's safe, that its safety profile is okay for human use. So overall, monitoring adverse events, understanding how adverse events and side effects work of drugs, both from a drug development clinical standpoint, but also a pharmaceutical standpoint in terms of pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, etc. Now, if you guys are familiar with pharmacy school, our education really consists of understanding those principles at both a basic level and a complex level, overlooking all therapeutic areas. So generally, we're taught how to analyze side effects, adverse events, etc. So again, that's why it's incredibly important for PharmDs to be in pharmacovigilance. I think that they can be a huge asset to any team, and overall, it just fits really nicely. Now, for those of you who don't know, what is an adverse event? The definition of an adverse event is a reaction within a patient's body that is caused by either a drug or a candidate molecule. We all know what this is. It's a side effect. But again, knowing the importance of a side effect within clinical trials for your drug development process, and then understanding what you need to do with that information is really key within pharmacovigilance. You are analytically thinking and coming up with conclusions based on the data that you're seeing on these adverse events that are happening to patients within your study, and especially if it passes that threshold of the efficacy. There's a risk versus benefit scenario there, and if the risks and the safety profile is just not worth it in comparison to the efficacy of the drug, then your drug is not going to be favorable and therefore will not be approved. So again, understanding those implications and being able to critically think and apply them to the studies your company might be running, etc. So within PV, you're really the manager of assessing that. Is the safety profile of this drug good enough to substantiate the efficacy of the drug? And of course, there are many regulations around the documentation and notification of any side effects within studies, within the drug development process to the FDA. So pharmacovigilance would additionally ultimately be responsible for that. So I've kind of generally talked about what PV is, what the job really encompasses, but let's deep dive and talk about what the general responsibilities really are. So when you are assessing drug profiles for both approved drugs and investigational products, the roles of individuals within PV are responsible for the following. A lot of the time, drug molecules aren't completely novel. What I mean by this is a lot of times therapies can be a combination of two drugs, and most of the time, one of those two drugs is generally approved and well known for the use of something. Now, the use and the indication that it's approved for might not be in the disease state that you're looking to use the medication in to treat X patients, but that is still inclusive of the drug's profile. So whenever there's a new product, again, especially when it's something that may have already been approved, that's on the market, and you're using it in conjunction with a novel molecule, then you're going to do that research on any previously known data of any adverse effects of the materials and the active ingredient within this new product. Number two is after you know of adverse effects, you then need to recognize changes in the frequency and severity of those adverse effects. So once you know of an adverse effect that happens with a drug, you obviously can't just leave it there. You have to continue to monitor it, and as you get more data, assess if it's getting better overall or if it's getting worse. And then of course the implications of that of what do I do with this information? If it's getting better, great, continue the study. If it's getting worse, really assess if the risks are worth the benefit. And many times, if the safety profile does not look good early on, companies can strategize to completely nix the study. So again, you would be helping in those decisions from a PV point of view. And number three generally is ensuring that any information that's getting communicated from PV to any external department, healthcare professional, and patients, and the regulatory agencies, you need to make sure that that information is correct. So a lot of that within the pharmaceutical industry is called quality checking. So really ensuring that the data you're presenting, the opinions you're presenting, the conclusions, the results, everything that comes under those scientific documents, again, specifically from a PV point of view here, are accurate. Nothing else matters if your data isn't correct. So that's really a key point here and a key activity for those in PV. Now let's talk about how you should think about the structure of PV and how some companies might structure the groups under PV. I think it's really easy to think about PV in terms of clinical research and non-clinical research. So putting it in those two buckets really helps us identify the activities that PV is responsible for during clinical trials and outside of clinical trials. So let's concentrate on the clinical trial bucket. As we know, assessing the safety profile of the drug within clinical trials is extremely important, and the work there is really different from any work PV might have outside of clinical trials. So that's usually why this is kind of seen as its own bucket, and people who are experts within the clinical development process in PV usually sit in this group. So as I've mentioned multiple times now, within clinical research, the role of PV is to determine the risk versus benefit and give the okay that, okay, the safety profile of this drug is worth the benefit of this medicine. And again, give that okay to move on with the next step. As you may know, to get a drug approved, you have to have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials with, of course, statistically significant data that shows that the drug is efficacious and has a good safety profile and would be useful for the proposed indication. So within these clinical trials, PV is involved all the way from preclinical to phase 1, through phase 3, through the approval of the drug, and even after that. After a drug is approved, you can have ad hoc analyses or phase 4 studies to keep assessing the safety profile of the drug, and of course, PV is involved there. So PV can be really involved in the whole process from really the beginning of the drug discovery process to the end post-approval. Now let's talk about the group that sits outside of clinical research for PV. Now, although looking at the safety profile of a drug within clinical trials is extremely important, you can't just silo that data and not look at anything else. So the group that's responsible for the clinical trials will overlook all the details within the trials, but you need a group to look outside of that. The group that's looking at the data of any previously known adverse effects, the group that's looking at any potential long-term effects, risks that could come with potentially hiring the dose of this medication, possibly missing the dose of this medication, which happens with patients a lot. Those kinds of external data points that are still extremely important to the safety profile of the drug are researched and found by the non-clinical trial PV group. So you can kind of be an expert in both or either or, but as you can see, there's a use for kind of all of those skills within PV as those different activities occur within the company. Overall, why is PV important? Without the safety profile and a good safety profile of a drug where it really does outweigh the risks of the safety profile to the benefits of the drug, is required to get approval in the US for a drug. So again, PV is extremely important in initializing and following through with all of those activities to ensure that the safety profile of a drug looks A1 to get that approval. On both sides of PV, within clinical research and outside of clinical research, you really need to have those healthcare professionals that have a sound scientific background, that understand the nuances of both the clinical trial, the safety profile, patients, real-world scenarios, etc. And so these teams are generally filled with people with higher medical degrees such as MDs, PhDs, PharmDs, etc. That expertise that comes with those higher degrees is really necessary here because, again, you're the one deciding does it move forward or not. So let's move on and talk about the sub-departments within pharmacovigilance. The first is operations. Now, as I've mentioned previously, you are going to see that every group within the pharmaceutical industry usually has an operations division. It only makes sense within every department there should be a strategy group and an operations group. Strategy is the one coming up with the plan. Operations is executing it, and of course they have to work together to really make the dream happen. But since operations is on the more simpler side of work, usually operations is where entry-level positions are the most available, and generally in one's career path in any industry, you generally go from the operations side of things to more the strategy over your career. The next subdepartment within pharmacovigilance is surveillance. As the name suggests, this is the group that's really doing the long-term data search, and they're really responsible for both that risk management and detection part of PV. Here, of course, this is an outside of clinical research type department, and you're really monitoring everything that you can about any drug product that you have to overlook. So every piece of data that is external to the clinical trials should be under your watch. You should keep watch on it if there's any changes, if there's anything that needs to happen based on the data that you observe, then you need to be the one communicating that to the internal company. Here, you're responsible for providing analyses on any data, again, on a large scale that might be present for you. So overall, some roles that might come under this would be pharmacovigilance scientist, drug safety physician, etc. Again, you know the science, you're able to assess the data and provide analyzation and summaries on that. Now, the next subdepartment within pharmacovigilance is systems. Now, this division is really focused on building the systems to deal with the data. As you can imagine, there's a lot of data coming in from clinical trials, from external sources, and you need to have a tech solution, a software of sorts that can actually deal with that data and have it in a form where you can understand it. So this is really the team that is consistently setting up those systems for the different types of data that are coming in, for what the department needs and for what the company needs. Here, you really need to make sure that those systems are in line with the most updated regulations in regards to clinical trial data, patient information, FDA regulations, etc. So again, within this department, you need to scientifically understand the data and the implications of the data, but basically be able to have the skills to build the systems around actually configuring the data. So here, of course, this is a more technical side of things, but again, for those who are interested, you can really tie a lot of different skills within this subdepartment. And I can kind of see, someone with the background of IT in some sorts, whether it's self-learned or curriculum-based, and then pharmacy or scientific background of sorts, and putting those together within this subdepartment. Now, the next little subdivision is called QPPV, or Qualified Person for Pharmacovigilance. But basically, these are the people that are subject matter experts in this specific department. So they are the people who really know what to do on the safety side of things when a drug is either nearing approval or has gotten approval. So these are the subject matter experts that you want to bring in when a drug is nearing that time of approval, and of course you still want their expertise after approval. These positions are held by really, really experienced professionals who have been in the industry for a while, know kind of exactly what to do, and can come in at that time and tell you what strategically makes the most sense based on your data, based on your program, and make that program successful, again, from a safety profile point of view, which is incredibly important when talking about drugs. All right, so who can work in PV? Honestly, anyone with a scientific background. I think it is one of the easier departments to kind of get your foot in the door if you're looking to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's not only for PharmDs. If you have a bachelor's in pharmacy or a bachelor's of science of any sort, I think that you would assimilate well into pharmacovigilance. So honestly, any life science background with, of course, relevant experience, I think would succeed in pharmacovigilance. Although anyone from life sciences can be here, within these roles and departments, depending on which role you're going for, higher degrees are preferred, but again, kind of play to your strengths. After a while, your degree does not matter. After a while, the years and your experience you've put in matter. So always keep that in mind. But of course, because these are scientific roles, higher scientific degrees are always preferred. So overall, PharmDs are kind of, again, in the perfect position for gaining a position within pharmacovigilance because you have a higher degree, you're well trained in science, and not only do you understand the science, but you understand the adverse drug profile. From a therapeutics point of view, from a clinical point of view, from a medicinal chemistry point of view, you understand everything and at least understand how to analyze it. So I think that it's actually such a perfect background for this functional area. So why would you want to go into PV? I think the first reason is really being comfortable and looking forward to receiving the data, sifting through data, analyzing the data, and being able to summarize it and come up with conclusions. Moreover, if you can come up with recommendations of, hey, look, the data says this and this is what we should do, the more power to you. That's exactly the skill set that people are looking for. So if that's something that you're interested in, consuming data, analyzing data on your own, coming up with your conclusions based on the data that you see and any other background information and educational material you might read up on, making conclusions, and then working with the team, presenting your conclusions, talking to people, bringing in their opinion, maybe taking some things out as you talk through things, and coming up with a final product. If you like any or all of the aspects of what I just said, then pharmacovigilance is really right for you. So not only should you have interest in looking at the adverse profile and safety profile of a drug, but also understand how to analyze it, summarize, and deliver it. So if you're looking for a role within pharmacovigilance, I wanted to highlight some entry-level roles and some possible other roles that you might see yourself in. For entry-level roles, you can see roles such as pharmacovigilance specialist, safety scientist associate, PV associate, PV safety officer, and then of course the normal hierarchy of manager, director, vice president, senior vice president, as it exists in every other functional area in a pharmaceutical company. So overall, that was super long, but I hope that that kind of gave you a deeper look into what pharmacovigilance is, if it's right for you. And as always, please don't take just my content and my videos for face value. Take what you think is beneficial from them, leave the rest. Put it together with other side research that you might do, whether you've already done it or if you go research after this video. Put all the data that you have consumed together, come up with your own opinions and conclusions about what exactly might be right for you or what you should do. But again, I hope that these videos overall are really helpful. If you guys have any follow-up questions, as always, feel free to just drop them down below or email me at focusrxpharma@gmail.com. You guys have been great about contacting me, and I literally now have a block time every day where I actually look to just respond to you guys, whether it's through email, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, LinkedIn messages. You guys reach out in a multitude of places, and I really do appreciate you guys reaching out, asking your questions, and of course, I hope my answers help you guys. So overall, just don't hesitate to reach out at all. Next, I just wanted to highlight the shirt that I'm wearing. I am wearing the Friends-inspired Pharmacist long sleeve t-shirt in pink. I have this in hoodies, crew neck, short sleeve t-shirts in a multitude of colors. So if you guys are interested in any pharmacy merch, whether it's the one I'm wearing or any of the multiple designs that I have, feel free to check it out. The link is down in the description bar below. And lastly, if you found any value in this video, if you guys enjoyed watching this and learned something from it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe while you're at it. That really helps with the algorithm. It helps to make YouTube realize that this video is good content and to kind of push it out to other people to watch it as well. So if you guys think that it's worth it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. That is it for today's video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and you guys will see me in the next one.